Welcome back, everyone, to World Cup 2026. This is episode 19 of our series, and what a journey it has been. We are officially wrapping up the round of 32. I'm Arthur, and as always, I am joined by my brilliant daughter, Nora. Nora, looking at the sheer emotion on the pitches across North America these past few days, I remember when knockout football felt like a rare, fleeting moment. Now, with this expanded format, we are bathed in these do-or-die spectacles day after day. It is the beautiful game at its most unforgiving.
It really is, Dad. And welcome to the listeners. This 48-team ecosystem has completely changed the landscape of the tournament. The variables have multiplied, the tactical diversity is off the charts, and we are seeing some fascinating data emerge as the pressure ramps up. The round of 32 has given us everything from high block pressing masterclasses to sheer penalty shootout chaos. Let's get right into it.
Let's start with harsh reality and sheer drama. How about that Cape Verde and Argentina match? I was transported back to the pure, unadulterated romance of the World Cup. Vozinha, the Cape Verde goalkeeper, putting on an absolute clinic. They pushed Argentina to the absolute brink, taking them to extra time, 3-2. The underdog spirit was roaring. But then, a moment of magic and tragedy. Messi whipping in a corner kick that resulted in a crushing own goal. And that pass from Martinez to set up Messi, absolute world-class texture to the game.
The heat maps from that match were wild, Dad. Cape Verde essentially abandoned a traditional low block and decided to go toe-to-toe in the transition moments. Cabral's bending super strike to bring them level in extra time was fundamentally a low-probability shot, but the execution was flawless. But Argentina's XG plus XA per 90 stats ultimately overwhelmed them. They just create too much volume. Moving on, we also have to talk about Egypt surviving that shootout against Australia.
Oh, what a roller coaster for Egypt! Mo Salah starting his first knockout game of the tournament. You could feel the lift in the stadium the moment he walked out of the tunnel. But my heart broke for Hani. Becoming the first player in World Cup history to score 2 own goals in the same tournament, that is a heavy burden to carry. Thankfully, the Australian goalkeeper gamble backfired in the shootout, and Egypt squeezed through into the last 16.
The data on mid-game goalkeeper substitutions for shootouts shows it's highly volatile, and Australia found that out the hard way. Meanwhile, Colombia dispatched Ghana 1-0 thanks to that clinical John Arias goal, and Switzerland strolled past Algeria 2-0 with Manzambi absolutely dazzling on the wing. His progressive carries and shots on target per 90 are leading the Swiss squad right now. But Dad, I want to pivot us to a team we haven't deep dived into yet, Spain. Let's look at what the modern Spanish architect is building.
Spain. I remember when the Spanish side was all about the hypnotic rhythm of tiki-taka. 1,000 passes to lull you to sleep before the fatal blow. It was beautiful, like a classical symphony. But this current iteration feels different. They still have the technique, but there's a sudden violence to their attacks, a directness that catches you off guard. What are you seeing behind the curtain, Nora?
You're spot on about the directness. And in their encounter with Austria, they easily won 3-0. The modern Spanish formation relies heavily on verticality. They aren't just hoarding possession for the sake of it anymore. If you look at their goals and assist data, their wingers are isolating defenders and driving into the box at a terrifying rate. Their XG generation is coming from fewer but much higher quality chances. They lead the tournament in tackles per 90 and interceptions per 90, high up the pitch. It's an aggressive counter-pressing system that chokes the opposition before they can even cross the halfway line.
It is remarkable to watch. They still respect the ball, but they don't worship it quite as blindly as they used to. Let's turn to Ivory Coast against Norway. Watching the Elephants always reminds me of the sheer power and grace of Didier Drogba's era. But this time, it was the Norwegian machine that prevailed 2-1.
It was a fascinating clash of styles. Norway's expected goals were largely driven by their efficiency on the counter. Antonio Nusa and Erling Haaland were clinical. Ivory Coast had moments of brilliance. especially with Amad Diallo's goal, but their big chances missed metric ultimately cost them against a very organized Norwegian low block.
And then we have France completely dismantling Sweden 3-0. Kylian Mbappé grabbing 2 goals. It felt like watching a classic French side from the late 90s, just absolute dominance from back to front.
The data on France is frankly terrifying for the rest of the tournament. Their expected goals on target were through the roof, and Bradley Barcola's addition to the score sheet shows their attacking depth. Sweden tried to stay compact, but France's XG plus XA per 90 is currently pacing the entire field. They are simply overwhelming opponents with sheer offensive volume.
Speaking of overwhelming, how about the sheer drama of Germany being knocked out by Paraguay on penalties? A 1-1 draw after extra time. You know, I grew up believing that the Germans simply do not lose penalty shootouts. It was an unwritten rule of the World Cup.
Statistically, their shootout record has been immense historically, but regression to the mean spares no one, Dad. Paraguay's defensive metrics were off the charts. They absorbed an incredible amount of pressure, completely stifling Germany's big chances created in the final third. Julio Enciso's first-half goal gave them something to defend, and their goalkeeper, Orlando Gil, was an absolute wall in the shootout.
It really was a defensive masterclass. But for pure entertainment, Brazil against Japan was a delight. Brazil edging it 2-1 with Gabriel Martinelli scoring deep into stoppage time. It had that classic Brazilian flair, even if they had to grind it out at the end.
Japan's tactical setup was brilliant. They pressed high and disrupted Brazil's midfield pivot. Kaishu Sano's early goal forced Brazil to completely alter their attacking geometry, but Brazil's sheer talent won out. Casemiro stabilizing the midfield and Martinelli capitalizing on fatigued Japanese legs in the 99th minute perfectly aligns with the data on late-game XG spikes against high-pressing teams.
And we can't ignore Morocco's incredible shootout victory over the Netherlands after a tense 1-1 draw. The atmosphere for the Atlas Lions is just electrifying. Reminds me of their magical run in Qatar.
The metrics behind Morocco's run are remarkably consistent. They don't mind conceding possession, but their interceptions per 90 in the middle third are elite. Cody Gakpo gave the Dutch the lead, but Morocco's 90-minute equalizer completely shifted the momentum. By the time it reached penalties, Morocco's psychological advantage was evident.
That late equalizer was a heartbreaker for the Dutch. And speaking of late heartbreak, we have to mention South Africa against Canada. A tense, grueling match that looked destined for extra time until Steven Eustáquio found the back of the net in the 99th minute for a 1-0 Canadian victory.
Canada's persistence paid off. South Africa maintained a very rigid defensive shape, keeping Canada's expected goals on target artificially low. But Eustáquio's late run into the box exploited a momentary lapse in marking. It's a harsh exit for South Africa, but a massive tactical victory for Canadian football.
A clear trend is that no victory can be taken for granted. A great example of that is England. I remember watching them struggle for decades when falling behind, but against DR Congo, it felt like a different narrative. Trailing 1-0 at halftime after Brian Chipenga's shock early goal, I thought the old ghosts had returned. But then, Harry Kane delivered an absolute captain's performance. 2 late goals to seal a 2-1 victory. That is the first time in their history they've won a World Cup match after trailing at the half.
It was a massive psychological hurdle, but if you look at the underlying numbers, England's expected goals completely overwhelmed DR Congo in the second half. Thomas Tuchel's substitutions changed the geometry of the pitch. Anthony Gordon coming on provided immediate width and directness, creating both assists for Kane. Congo had a miserable 38% possession in the group stages, and their low block finally cracked under the sustained shot-on-target volume from the English forwards.
It was relentless pressure. And speaking of late drama, the Portugal against Croatia match gave us a breathtaking finale. Portugal wins it 2-1 with Gonçalo Ramos scoring deep into stoppage time. And of course, earlier in the match, Cristiano Ronaldo calmly slotting away a penalty. The man's longevity and composure in these high-stakes moments is just something you have to sit back and admire.
Ronaldo's conversion rate from the spot remains elite, But the real tactical story there was Portugal's midfield dominance. They heavily restricted Croatia's big chances created. Even though Ivan Perisic managed to find the net, Croatia's expected goals on target were negligible compared to Portugal's sustained attacking phases. Ramos's winner in the 93rd minute was essentially statistical probability catching up with Croatia's tired legs.
Tired legs or not, it was a beautiful moment. Now let's cross the Atlantic to the host nations. The United States put on a show in the Bay Area against Bosnia. A 2-0 victory, their first knockout stage win since 2002. Mauricio Pochettino has really built a cohesive unit. But what impressed me most was their resilience. Playing with 10 men for over half an hour after Folarin Balogun's red card, yet they never panicked. Youri Tielemans' magnificent free kick to seal it was pure class.
The data on playing with 10 men usually predicts a massive drop in XG and a spike in expected goals against, but the US completely defied that trend. They shifted into a compact defensive shape and neutralized Bosnia's wide overloads. Bosnia's expected goals per 90 plummeted after the red card, which is counterintuitive but speaks volumes about the USA's interceptions per 90 and positional discipline. They absolutely earned that clean sheet.
They certainly did. But if we are talking about defying the odds, we must bow down to the sheer spectacle of Belgium versus Senegal. Senegal goes 2-0 up. Ismaila Sarr scoring a sensational goal. I thought the Belgian golden generation was finally, definitively over. But they clawed back. Lukaku scores, then Tielemans equalizes in the 89th minute, and then the absolute drama of a 125th minute penalty in extra time. Tielemans scoring the latest goal in World Cup history to win it 3-2. You just cannot write a script like that.
It was statistical anomaly after statistical anomaly. Historically, teams trailing by 2 goals in knockout stages have an incredibly low progression rate. But Belgium's expected goals and big chances created skyrocketed in the last 20 minutes of regulation. Senegal's fatigue led to individual errors, culminating in that Lamine Camara foul in the box. The social media trend analysis showed an absolute explosion of mentions for Tielemans after that penalty.
It was a cruel heartbreak for Senegal, but a legendary escape for Belgium. Finally, let's look at Mexico handling their business against Ecuador with a 2-0 win. The atmosphere at the Azteca. I still get chills thinking about the 1986 tournament there. They won by the exact same scoreline in the round of 16 back then against Bulgaria. The stadium was a sea of green, and the energy was simply infectious.
The Azteca advantage is very real, Dad. Mexico is unbeaten at home in competitive matches since 2013, and their metrics against Ecuador showed exactly why. They pressed high, leading to efficient goals from Julian Quiñones and Raúl Jiménez. Ecuador's frustration boiled over, resulting in a late red card for Piero Hincapié. Mexico's defensive efficiency and tackles per 90 have been stellar all tournament. They are going to be a massive analytical threat going into their clash with England.
Wow, that was quite a list. It is definitely time for our Legend of the Game segment. Today, I want to talk about a man who didn't need a complex system to dominate. The Black Panther himself, Eusebio.
A brilliant choice. Eusebio is a fascinating case study because his raw output was completely anomalous for the era he played in.
He was a force of nature. I remember the stories of the 1966 World Cup. Portugal was down 3-0 to North Korea. Most teams would crumble, tactics would fall apart, panic would set in. Eusebio simply refused to lose. He scored 4 goals in that match. His playing style was a terrifying combination of explosive pace, athletic power, and a right foot that struck the ball like a cannon. He had an aura of sheer inevitability. When he had the ball at his feet, the whole stadium held its breath. It wasn't about data. It was about destiny.
While I appreciate the poetry of destiny, his metrics are what make him undeniable. If we mapped his 1966 tournament into our modern system, his goals per 90 and expected goals on target would be off the charts. He was incredibly efficient, converting chances from zones where the XG is traditionally very low. He was the ultimate outlier in the dataset of 1960s football. Speaking of modern phenomena, though, let's step off the pitch for a moment. Have you been seeing what is trending online around this World Cup?
I try to keep my focus on the grass, Nora. But I know you're about to pull me into the digital age. What is happening out there?
It's amazing. The most watched YouTube channel covering the tournament right now is Celine Department. The fan engagement is entirely shifting away from traditional broadcasts, and the social media trend analysis shows a massive spike in anime-style replays of World Cup goals on TikTok. Fans are taking the broadcast footage and digitally animating the players to look like anime heroes mid-match. Also, there's been a lot of chatter about the climate conditions in these massive stadiums. Some of the indoor venues are pumping the AC so high the fans are wearing winter coats while eating local barbecue.
Anime replays? Well, I suppose if it brings a new generation to appreciate a perfectly weighted through ball, I can't complain too much. Though, I'll stick to my memories of the sun beating down on the Azteca, thank you very much. It is wonderful, though, how the local cuisines, from poutine to barbecue, are giving the fans another reason to cheer. The World Cup is a carnival after all.
Exactly. Now let's look forward, because the knockout bracket waits for no one. We just had a massive result wrap-up. Canada against Morocco. Morocco took the victory 3-0.
A tough pill to swallow for Canada, but they should not overlook what they achieved just by getting here. The emotion of Crépeau, the incredible journey of Moise Bombito, going from a church parking lot to the World Cup pitch. These are the stories we cherish. But on the pitch today, Morocco was just too sharp. Ounahi, capitalizing on that set piece early in the second half, really broke the Canadian resistance.
Morocco's tactical discipline was superb. Canada wasted no time applying early pressure, and Oluwaseyi had a glorious chance denied by Bounou. But once Morocco took the lead, the game became very physical. Hakimi and Laria both picked up yellow cards after a scuffle, and Canada's big chances missed metrics started climbing. Morocco punished them for their inefficiency. Looking at the schedule ahead, we have some absolutely massive round of 16 clashes.
We certainly do. I am circling Mexico versus England in the Mexico City Stadium. There are already fears of thunderstorms forcing an earlier kickoff, but the atmosphere will be electric regardless. Survival is the absolute key for England in this epic test, or it will be a Mexican wave goodbye. Fit and firing Harry Kane is leading them by example, but Mexico in their home environment is a terrifying prospect.
The data suggests Mexico will control the tempo. England's XG against has been slightly concerning when they face high-pressing teams. We also have Norway against Brazil. Norway has finally lived up to their World Cup billing, and a reunion with Brazil is perfect timing. Will Carlo Ancelotti's tactical setup for Brazil be able to contain the sheer physical output of the Norwegian forwards? That's the match I am most interested in from an analytical standpoint.
Ancelotti has turned Brazil into a machine, but with that classic Brazilian flair still intact, it's going to be a masterpiece of a match. Well, we have plenty of football ahead of us, and the stakes are only getting higher.
That wraps up episode 19 of World Cup 2026. Thank you to everyone for tuning in and breaking down the numbers and the narratives with us. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss our round of 16 wrap-up, where we will see which of these giants fall and which underdogs continue their dream runs.
A warm goodbye from me as well. Remember to appreciate the little moments out there on the pitch, because history is being written before our very eyes. We will see you next time.